Jonathan. Hey guys, my name's John. I work with Zetachain, and as Jonathan mentioned, formerly I was a tech journalist for about 10 years. So I wrote about crypto for TechCrunch around 5 years ago. I was a tech journalist all in all for about 10 years. So one of the things I did is interview a bunch of crypto folks, including CZ and some other crypto founders and as a journalist. And like I say, I'm working here with Zeta Chain as on the marketing team. Very excited to have all the folks that we've got on this panel today. We're going to go very deep into DeFi, covering some of the past and how DeFi came to be back in the day, and what we can look forward to going forward. Hopefully, the market is getting more interesting in the last few months, and we're looking forward to going into detail about what that might mean in terms of DeFi, some of the projects that we're working with, and Bitcoin also. So once we have the speakers, we'll begin to introduce them, and then we'll go on from there. So actually, we could potentially start soon. I see we've got three of the four speakers I think that we've got. So I'll let them introduce themselves first, and we can go on from there. So I think without further ado, let's go to the first speaker that we've got. So Eddie Finance, one of the projects that is building on Zeta Chain. Can you guys introduce yourselves? What you're doing?
Sure. Hey everyone, glad to be here. Thanks for the invite, Jonathan and John. Thanks so much. So, just a quick introduction about Eddy Finance. What we enable native assets to transfer between different blockchains, including Bitcoin and Ethereum. So we say goodbye to wrapping and try to remain with the safety of native assets. And in that, we have algorithms that try and optimize for the best throughput. So as an end user, you get the maximum throughput when you're moving from chain A to chain B.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Alex, so my colleague Alex, do you want to say hi to the folks who are listening into the stream? Introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, it's really great to be here and just listening, just talking about DeFi today. My name is Alex, business development here at Zetachain. Zetachain, we are the first and only decentralized EVM compatible layer one with built-in cross-chain interoperability. So we connect to EVM chains, we connect to non-EVM chains like Bitcoin as well. And we have our own omni-chain smart contracts as well, where developers are able to build omni-chain dApps directly from Zetachain, manage all your liquidity from Zetachain for all of our connected chains, and manage all your assets and data just from one singular chain.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Alex. And from Sushi Swap, we have Goose. Goose, hi. How are you doing?
Good. How you doing, man? Thanks for having me. I'm Goose. I'm one of the community leads over at Sushi. I was actually just talking with you guys either last week or the week before, I think, on an AMA. Happy to be back. We're currently live across 30 plus networks. We do everything from cross-chain to payment streaming with Furo. We have V2 constant product pools. We have concentrated liquidity V3 pools, et cetera, et cetera. Smart pools. Yeah, excited to be here. Talk about it.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us again. Great stuff. I think we're waiting for one more panelist from Lennox, but while we wait, let's actually just kick off and get started. I think it's a good time for us to move here. We've got some folks who are joining, which is obviously great. Awesome. So I wanted to start by looking back at the birth of DeFi back in back in DeFi summer. It was like a long time ago now. A couple of years have passed before DeFi was even a thing. I'm just curious about how you guys kind of feel, and what do you believe for yourselves began with DeFi Summer? What do you think the factors that came together to ignite DeFi Summer back 2 years ago were?
Yeah, I can jump in first
Anyone can
here.
jump in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sure, sure.
Well, I can speak for at least living. I'm American, so at least living over here in the USA, like COVID and the stimulus checks, I think actually were what kicked off a lot of it. It's actually what got me into it. I found myself with a fair bit of change and nothing to do. So I think everybody's sitting around at home and looking for something to do. Bitcoin was obviously running a bit, and then I think once people started seeing these huge gains coming in, and everyone just farming, all these food tokens, which I felt like kind of was a big part of it as well. People were just basically picking up free money off the ground. Money was just moving around, and I think it got hot. I mean, I think that's what kind of kicked it off, at least from my end. That's how I got into it, at least. But that's also where I heard about it, was people making all this money off of farming tokens, farming food tokens of all things, which obviously
Yeah, makes sense.
we hear it too.
I guess there's also
Yeah.
it was related to some of the stuff that was happening in the stock market, right? Everything going up.
Yeah, and obviously that gets excitement going. But I do think, generally speaking, I think people kind of sitting around with nothing to do, and it's not like if you had lost your job or you were on furlough or whatever. I mean, it wasn't like anyone was hiring anytime really soon. So I think a bunch of people just had time and the wherewithal to make some money. And then once they started making money and telling people about it, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of.
That makes sense. And the other guys, how did you guys get into DeFi for the first time?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it stems from the 5 pillars of TradFi. So earning, saving, investing, borrowing, and spending. I definitely agree with Goose. There was a strong catalyst for DeFi Summer during the height of the global pandemic, right? When everyone was being unfortunately laid off, we saw a lot of people having to work from home. And once people started to realize that the traditional financial institution everywhere worldwide is really built on trust, right? It's built on trust and confidence that we're going to have the government, we're going to have the banks, and they're going to act in the best interest of consumers. And then once people started to realize that trust and confidence in a financial institution can be trustless using code, I think that's also what really triggered the start of DeFi Summer. So when I go back to the 5 pillars of traditional finance, which is earning, saving, investing, borrowing, and spending, I'm based here in the US, so a lot of that I had to do through my checkings account, my savings account, using really big banking companies. And oftentimes we are quite limited in what we can do and the amount of options that we can have. So when I was working from home and when I was very deep down into crypto as well, and I'm sure this resonates with a lot of people, the opportunities that I had by just going on some of these big projects that were popping up at the time, like Compound, and being able to stake and then actually earn any sort of yield by putting in my crypto. I think that's what really started to trigger. And then once people started to see, hey, this isn't restricted to just one region, one person, or just one company, and it's truly decentralized in a way where anyone is able to join this global financial ecosystem, where it's completely trustless and you're able to do the same things, similar to an augment of the traditional financial system. And then once we start to see this being more adopted and the use cases being completely, I mean, the use case is growing at tremendous speed. That's what really triggered DeFi Summer. If we can do all of this now, imagine what we can do in a completely trustless way.
Was that? Uh, and you guys over Eddie? How did you guys first get into
Yeah.
the DeFi space?
So yeah, so what basically was the trigger for us to move into DeFi was during the same catalyst period of global pandemic. I was I was looking at DeFi before too, which is when before it got too popular, right? So the core fundamental of why it sold value to me was very high. But what I would generally question is why would someone want to come and provide liquidity when there are not enough traders and not enough incentives for anyone to do so and participate in that. What I think was a pivotal moment in all of this happening was how Compound allowed users to now, farm tokens. So token farming for providing liquidity came into the picture, and then by the catalyst of whatever was happening around globally, invited a lot of folks to just come and put in flock their money, which now they had more to save with the pandemic, and then again the more mindset of having to rotate money in that way. And that flocked a lot of liquidity, that flocked a lot of traders to come in, and the whole cycle kicked off. And then projects like Yearn, Aave, Curve, Uniswap sort of built on top of the yield farming set the stage that was set by Compound, and everybody started moving towards that. And that we can see how suddenly the whole TVL sort of boosted for the DeFi space. And that is how the first sort of summer started, and that is how I and other teammates at Eddie also got into DeFi.
Do you guys have any crazy stories? Any wild kind of farming that you did, or any kind of
Mhm.
crazy like yield that you guys got back then?
Not really. So we were very conscious of like where we were going. So we never like took it to a crazy amount of extent, but we would essentially try and make like a percent a day, and that again like with the market sort of changing and V3 that came in, that is what we again try and do, just provide liquidity in the right bands. And as a big part of my journey in at least Web3, I have tried and worked on yields for a long time. So which is where we try and find good opportunities. But yes, I think the best one had been for a couple of months. I was trying and just add liquidity and make like 1% a day on that, which is very crazy when you consider the amount that you get with banks when you provide liquidity.
Absolutely, yeah. Any other guys? Any crazy stories that you found? I'm sure you're sitting on plenty out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really do much as we have someone from Eddie here doing it, but I think for me it was more of a failed experiment. Um I remember just reading all about compounds and people just yield farming and such, and I thought, if they can do it, I can do it. And then just made a lot of mistakes, but it was definitely a learning experience, and through that, just learned a lot about what DeFi was. Recouped, just stopped crying over my losses, and just started focusing on what's next, and just started learning more about it. But honestly, not a success story, but I guess it's just a story of failures.
Mine has been a sine curve as well. It just goes up and down the whole portfolio because I'd make mistakes and then course correct them along the way. And specifically as the DeFi summer moved ahead and a lot of projects started coming in hot, that's where it was way harder to clear out the noise from actuality.
And yourself, Goose? It sounds like you must be sitting on some crazy stories, right, from back then. Hey, Goose, can you hear me? Can everyone else hear me? Have we lost
No, I can hear
have we
you,
lost
John.
Goose? Okay, I think maybe there's some kind of connection issue with Goose, but okay, we'll have to wait for his crazy stories back from original DeFi Summer a couple of years ago. But yeah, so I just want I'm really obviously the market has moved on somewhat. I think recently we're seeing some of the FOMO coming back with sort of token farming, and I think a lot of interest in airdrops. Just kind of curious, like for the for you guys on the panel, like how do you see the landscape has changed for DeFi over the last 2 years, fast forwarding to now?
Uh, there are a couple things. So one is the user experience of DeFi. When I first started my journey connecting to Uniswap and connecting to Compound and all these really big first movers in the DeFi space, a lot of it I I had to transfer tokens between my exchanges and then sending them to a different address and learning how to interact with different contracts and then learning how to do MetaMask and all that. So I definitely think the user experience side has definitely changed a lot for better or for worse, and I'll get into that, later into this talk. I think second is regulation. Um, we're starting to see synthetic tokens. And a lot of it was synthetic Japanese yen, synthetic stocks. So we're seeing the shift in the regulatory landscape of politicians debating what is permissible in DeFi, but obviously it's a completely trustless system. And we're starting to see KYC, we're starting to see proposals from anti-crypto senators who want to verify ownership of the person who owns a DeFi protocol. So I think on the regulation side, there's definitely been a lot of progression in that front as well. On the third side, it's quite interesting to see how we're also exploring this multi-chain era. When I first joined it, I was really restricted to just one chain, and now we're able to bridge different assets, and now we're able to cross between different assets seamlessly. And now we're able to do a lot of stuff that we didn't have the luxury of having when the DeFi summer first started. So I think those three are definitely my opinions of how the landscape for DeFi has changed since then to now.
Goose, it looks like we still can't hear you. I'm not sure if there's a mic issue on your side, but yeah. Mm, okay. How about Eddie? I'm sure you
I'll
guys
take
had
out
some
of
very
them.
strong
Yes.
opinions, as obviously you guys are
Yeah.
a player out there building a DeFi project. Like, how do you feel like those sort of tools
Mhm.
and the UX that you and others have
Yeah, so I
compares to
agree with
how
how
DeFi
sort
projects
of
work?
Alex has put it, right? I think the biggest change has been, as users, has been the user experience. Back then, let's say paying gas was very hard. There was a huge learning curve when you need to set up wallet, make sure your keys are safe, and then we time and again saw how that has changed. Second is, I think in last 2 years, the focus on DeFi has also increased in terms of, I know the numbers or TVLs do not reflect the same, but you see the percentage of the split of assets across CeFi and DeFi. There have been few triggers in the last year with everything happening around, let's say what FTX happened, and a lot of like yield generation products in Web2 sort of going down. There has been a keen shift on like focus on self custody, and with self custody, the biggest issue that needed to be solved, and the people have started working towards is user experience. Uh, in terms of things coming up like let's say Web3 orb that now allow you to not have to worry about maintaining seed phrase, and then using a 2 by 3 sort of mechanism you can now do social login. Now that's become big. There have been account abstraction wallets, a lot of like gas fee abstraction. For example, in the space of now, I was reading today how Immutable has removed gas fee for enabling like game players to come in more, and then games again connecting with DeFi. So in the last couple of years, there have been like steady improvements in terms of user experience. Second is, I think, the opportunity in terms of utilizing DeFi as a tool of like value transfer, as well as in terms of generation of yield and then maximizing your money throughput. There have been a lot of chains with a lot of good projects. So as a user, a couple of years back, where I would just stick to a couple of chains and then just move around them, now that has changed a lot. every 5 days I could be moving around chains, and then it's become a truly multi-chain sort of future where, as a DeFi sort of degen, or even as someone who just try to stick to the basics in DeFi, you need to move chains a lot because of how the liquidity and the incentives also flow. And that sort of begs for the question: how do you solve for better interoperability today? One more thing I've seen coming a lot is around the specific application layer that's being built. So a lot of perp dexes are trying to move to building their own app chains that will enable this, and that again culminates into a lot of fragmentation and also a lot of like vulnerabilities in the way that money has been moving. And to these, the next catalyst I see is how quality projects have been coming up, and slowly we've been moving in a wave where we were at the highest TVL in DeFi ever to hitting a bottom low, and then just skyrocketing back again, almost growing by 40-45% in last few days. In addition to that, I think building on, let's say, liquid staking has allowed a lot of people to become liquid, and that sort of flows into the whole DeFi space where you can now do like multiple loops and build complex strategies that previously weren't as effective. So it's been a very exciting time, and I think this whole trend will sort of continue to build more use cases and a robust ecosystem. I think what even with Zetatalks we are trying to do is include ecosystems with super high liquidity like Bitcoin and let them participate in DeFi, which is for most part like exclusively working on the Ethereum ecosystem, and then on a lot of L1s and L2s that are built on top of it.
Great points there, excellent, and especially including liquidity in the community from Bitcoin, which I think is something that we obviously power. Importantly, Goose, I think you're back, and hopefully your mic is working. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
All
can.
right.
Excellent. Great,
All
great,
right.
cool.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I don't know what's going
No
on.
worries.
To answer your first
Glad to have you
question,
back.
when I was talking, I actually learned nothing at DeFi Summer other than what not to do. So I did not have any great stories. I barely survived, but I learned a lot, and kind of helped me out in the future. But anyway, the next question, we're talking about the landscape for DeFi. Still, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, how different that you feel DeFi products and the landscape for DeFi is now versus 2 years ago when in DeFi Summer, when DeFi became a thing for the first time, and as these guys have said, how suddenly you had international networks outside of bank accounts and opportunities to make the kind of yield that you would never have dreamed of getting previously.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's changed just like a ton. Obviously, when we first came in, I mean, it was kind of there's a lot less education around. If you were trying to code up your own Solidity contract, there was a bunch of like. So I remember trying to do that on my own in 2021, and it took forever. And I wrote one earlier this year, and it took 5 minutes. Right, so that stuff was pretty quick. There's a lot more SDKs and kind of interoperability between projects. I think a lot of people are working together now. There's obviously far more libraries to use as far as front end integrations and stuff go. It makes all that stuff a lot easier. You can write smart contracts in almost every language now. It seems like Rust, Python, Huff, Cairo, Move, et cetera, et cetera. Definitely feels like there's way more education. I think I just said that, but everybody is a lot more sophisticated. I think I don't think anybody would ever accuse the crypto markets of being efficient, but they used to be a lot more inefficient, and it felt like kind of more easy mode. And now everybody's more educated, whether or not they came from TradFi or they've been around for a couple cycles now or what have you. So yeah, more sophisticated users, more sophisticated developers, more competition due to those things. I do think there's a fair bit more security now because there's been more rugs. But audits are a huge deal now, and you pretty much a must. I mean, no one will ape anything without an audit now, or at least promise of an audit. Yeah, and just obviously there's way more places to conduct business on. There's got L1s, L2s, ZK environments, stuff like that. I think pretty much everything has changed, really, to be honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think your point earlier about what you learned from DeFi Summer back 2 years ago was what not to do. I think that's one of the most important things. I mean, that's the kind of experience that people want to get as quickly as they possibly can, which unfortunately often takes some time, and it takes the learnings come from failing in some way, or maybe not taking opportunities that you think that you could take. So experience essentially. If you guys have just joined us, we're talking about DeFi Summer and how DeFi has changed in the last 2 years since then. We do want questions from the audience, but we're going to talk to our panelists first before we take those. So there's a bunch of questions that I have, which we're going to be going through first around DeFi as it is now and some other areas adjacent to that. And then when we're done, we will take questions from the audience. So if you do have questions, hang around, please. Still listen to the great insight that we've got from our three panelists, and then we'll have some time for you guys to speak at the end. Okay, we did touch on liquid staking during the last question that I asked, but it's such a huge, such a paradigm shift in terms of what you can do in DeFi. It gives you a lot more leverage and more options. I'm just curious, guys, going into a bit more detail. Does anybody want to provide some answers as to how liquid staking has impacted DeFi products and DeFi users, and how it might also impact the ecosystem going forward?
Yeah, so for everyone that's just listening, before we get into liquid staking, I just want to get into staking in general and what it was like before and what liquid staking provides, as well as its risks and positives as well. So right now, if you were to stake on ETH, you have to deposit a certain amount. I believe it's 32 ETH. I don't know if that number is still the same. Correct me if I'm wrong. And in turn, you're able to earn a chance to validate new transactions in exchange for locking up a certain amount of ETH. So you get rewarded in ETH, and there are some limits to this, right? You will have to lock your tokens, and you'll have to stake a given amount before you earn any rewards or being able to vote. But it really does depend on the token or coin that you are going to stake. So this will go tied back into the user experience that I've been saying all of my life in DeFi. And this is where liquid staking comes in. So obviously, there are some people who don't want to lock up their tokens for so long, and it's also an entry barrier to stake such a high amount. And this is where liquid staking comes in. So it's liquid staking, for new listeners here, is really the process of locking up funds to earn rewards while still having access to those funds. Oftentimes, it doesn't require such an abysmal large number of minimum tokens that you have to stake beforehand. And those funds are locked up in a protocol. They remain available, accessible in an escrow. You deposit your funds in a DeFi dApp and receive a tokenized version of the funds. So there are some ups and downs to this, right? There's a very small barrier to entry to this. Anyone is able to do it. It's not going to be such a high amount. You can normally remove any of the locks or any other limit requirement. And this also creates what I previously talked about before, the opportunity to yield farm. If you do it right, then there are people who take advantage of being able to use that token to get another loan on some other DeFi platforms, being able to get exposed to more higher APYs by yield farming, and you're able to sell it whenever as well. However, there are some risks, right? Because liquid staking brings the barrier of entry down, in my opinion, it actually complicates the user experience of things. There is a risk and benefit to everything, as in life. So when people are doing this, because if you choose the yield farm and you're going from dApp to dApp to dApp to dApp, you are exposing yourself to potential dApps that don't have the right security infrastructure, that don't really have the updated Solidity contracts, that don't have or rely on a lot of third-party bridges. And what we've seen in the past, in all of DeFi and most of crypto as well, we've seen rug pulls happen, we've seen bridges get hacked, we've seen so many points of failure. So this is where some of the risks can happen when it comes to liquid staking. But I want to open it up to the other panelists as well.
I agree with Alex. I think it's a good briefer of how liquid staking works. I think in terms of it solves for two major things. One is lowering the entry barrier, which is allowing anyone to just come in and participate with 0.1 ETH. And that's opened doors to a lot of folks to come in and experience staking. The second one is it definitely has some trade-offs, but it allows you to remain liquid and then give you the freedom to participate in DeFi the way you want. And I think that also resonates if you just look at the TVL today. The first one is Lido with a 20.2 billion in volume or in TVL. So a big chunk of users have now moved to using liquid staking and liquid stake derivatives to participate in DeFi. Same as with Rocket Pool. Like in top 10, there's Rocket Pool. If you look at another, and these are just purely ETH based. If you look at other chains, Stride is doing quite well on Cosmos. You've got Stader Labs running good liquid staking on few chains. The idea here has become that now you can exchange your. I'll just take example with ETH. So you can put in ETH, get a liquid stake derivative. It could be, let's say, Rocket Pool ETH, and then on that you're gaining a chunk of rewards that are accrued in terms of if you had staked and sort of helped the network. Now, the second part becomes you can now go to exchanges like Balancer and then trade your liquid stake derivative, let's say RP ETH, back to normal ETH. And now that has provided you higher liquidity. What has become very interesting, and things like Beefy Finance or even Cyan have been doing, is they're building on strategies on top of these. So I'll just take one short example and try and explain what I mean by this. So for example, today you can go to get ETH, put it on Lido, get the liquid stake derivative, go and now you're already earning like 4 or 5% on ETH. You can now go in, let's say, pick 50% of uh, liquid stake ETH and pick 50% of ETH, put it on a pool on, let's say, Balancer, and gain uh, rewards, which are additionally like 7-8% more. So you've already compounded to 12%, and then you can take that LP token, stake that in, or maybe you can borrow and lend that away, and sort of create these complex strategies that can effectively boost your yield. And that's how almost like a year back, that's how like Beefy and Cyan blew up. They would help you automate these strategies. They would help you sort of create and curate those strategies and deploy them one click. So it's a constant battle of the complexities that are being created with liquid stake derivatives, but also a good opportunity in terms of how you can utilize them. And then companies and sort of projects coming in that help you remove complexities in those strategies and enabling it for the masses. So I'm taking a lot of time, but I'll just run through another example where you can put in, let's say, Matic on Stader, get Matic X, and
Oh, I think we're having some more technical issues.
hello. Sorry, I think I just lost my voice.
Hey,
Yeah.
oh, we lost you for a second there. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Everyone's listening
Yeah.
with very bated breath for all the tips that you've got.
No. So what I was trying to say is like you can take Matic, put it on Stader, get Matic X, and then use Matic X and borrow and lend it on Aave and borrow 95% of Matic against Matic X. And in all that loop, it used to be incentivized, so you can keep on looping that. And then obviously, if you need to take care of the health factor and make sure you don't get liquidated with the movement, but in a sense, you can effectively increase the yield you'd get on the Matic ecosystem by or the help of liquid staking. So it's been an enabler in enabling a lot of strategies and sort of lowering the barrier for a lot of folks to come in. What the challenges it creates is in terms of security and in terms like you've seen hacks happen in liquid stake derivatives before. So there needs to be a robustness, but on the complexity level, there are a few good projects that are trying to sort of solve for it now. But it's a long way to go today.
Cool, very insightful. Thanks so much. And I'm sure you'll be getting hit up with a lot of people who are asking how they can take advantage of the immense knowledge that you seem to have on LSD. Cool, Goose. Anything you want to add beyond what the two guys have said so far?
Yeah, I was going to say they touched on pretty much most everything I think that's got going on. Obviously, you get to double dip on yield, which is great. One thing that I think wasn't really talked about, but I think it actually made proof of stake kind of like a lot more palatable to everybody because obviously it's super important for the security to have people to lock this stuff up. But I mean, locking up your money, I mean, you'd almost have to be not only a whale with the 32 ETH, but I mean, you kind of had to have some serious conviction, to keep your stuff on there. So I think it actually just one extra point on top of everything else is that I think it made the proof of stake, narrative adoption go a lot more smoothly than it might have, or the need for them to come up with some new system or some way to circumvent that. And then I mean, the only other thing I would say is that it obviously opened up a pretty large interoperability door. There's all kinds of projects building on LSTs and leveraging them against each other. And trying to think of a good example, like Pendle. Pendle opened up like a yield trading market with the stuff, and that in turn spun off PinPy. And I mean, innovation begets innovation. So it's really just another way for people to make money out here. But people definitely like to double dip on yield. They like to not lose the opportunity cost of locking up their funds. And I mean, I think we just continue to see more and more. And I mean, shoot, now we have liquid restaking, right? So I think we'll be seeing a lot more of this stuff in the future, and honestly see a lot more ways that different protocols can kind of work together and just kind of keep doing the building block Lego thing. But I do think interoperability is probably the biggest pro that it's got for it, in my opinion. And then the biggest con would probably be, it's kind of, at least on Ethereum mainnet, it's definitely a centralization vector, which we have to keep an eye on. But everyone seems to be keeping an eye on it and not be too worried about it. So I'm here for it.
That's very true. And innovation-wise, I think it's interesting to see, chains that are very much focused on DeFi and staking, come into the market to offer something a little bit different to what we're seeing out there, beyond say multi-purpose chains like Ethereum. Just kind of curious how you guys see this, and if you think there's space in the market for DeFi focused chains. How do you think that's impacted the landscape in terms of products that are out there?
Yeah, so I think from our previous DeFi summer to even about a year and a half ago, there has always been some barriers to entry. When I talk about that, I'll compare this to ETH, and ETH really was the first mover in DeFi. And as time matured, even after DeFi summer, we started to see, we started to create or lower the barriers of entry for different participants to become liquidity providers. And we've also just seen a lot of issues with high transaction costs. We've seen the network get congested. And for a lot of people all across the world, it's quite a large barrier in entry for some people. So when we started to see this market demand for lower transaction costs, increased throughput, how do we have enhanced security without compromising too much, or democratization of liquidity provision, I think we've seen Arbitrum become one of these really. I think Arbitrum becoming a DeFi specific L2 has really started to move the space when it came to lower transaction costs, increased throughput, acting as an L2, still using ETH's underlying L1 security, and also Arbitrum's capital efficiency that allows participants to become liquidity providers. So in traditional layer one based DeFi platforms, obviously the high costs associated with the transaction fees can be a barrier to entry for some would-be liquidity providers, and the reduced fees and transaction times and Arbitrum really leveled the playing field and even allowed those with very, very small capital to contribute liquidity to DeFi protocols. So I think a lot of these DeFi specific chains, a lot of these DeFi specific L2s or rollups, they all have really good intentions in mind. And it's really to reduce the barriers of entry for a lot of the people who don't have the resources to to keep up with L1 demands.
Cool. Other guys, you want to jump in on this? On DeFi and yield focused chains and how they've changed the landscape, and I guess from a developer point of view, how having those options has changed how you guys build product.
Yeah, so I'll try and touch upon this in some way. Right? So one has been the whole user experience lacking journey, and that stems from one, the complexity to get into DeFi that's been higher in the spectrum, right? I mean, you need to create a wallet, which for a lot of people who are just beginning or getting into the ecosystem has been tough. Maintaining it, making sure with so many risks out there, you don't get exposed to them, you don't sign a wrong transaction, etc. So one aspect comes up from the user experience, a little hard to grasp. Second comes with Ethereum, sort of every time there's a huge transaction volume, the fees sort of just plummets, and a lot of folks in DeFi do not have the ability to spend such a high amount on gas fees. So all these factors, along with, let's say, the complexity of using these or creating strategies, has become tough. What sort of DeFi focused chains have been able to do is sort of bring that barrier down. I think the first set of innovation in terms of how you can bring in more folks with, let's say, wallets that extract away the need to save and keep your seed phrases, having to, let's say, top up gas constantly, or such of these innovations have always started from these chains first, which is quite interesting because this is the sort of audience you wanted to solve for. uh, in my previous experience, like, we were building something called gas pay, which would let users pay gas fees in any token. And in fact, we started with Arbitrum and Polygon because of sort of trying to solve for user experience in those chains. Second is the because if you solve for experience in the whole learning curve, the fee is lower on these chains. Second is there's a huge bunch of flourishing ecosystems that are developed on these chains that are accessible to most people, and that creates huge value. And third part is for specific functions, like what DYDX has been doing, for example, building their own sort of app chain that lets you trade, has enabled very fast trading experience, and then also has helped sort of optimize for those specific use cases a little bit more. And I think that is also turning towards a future that we see for specific use cases. More DeFi specific chains in the future would come out that optimize on certain things and make sure you can do things. For example, order book based perplex trading. Now that wasn't possible before, but with these chains coming in and infrastructure being set in place, a lot of things can now get democratized and also become readily available at a case where anybody, irrespective of how much money they have to put into the ecosystem, can come in and sort of get that barrier crossed over. So I think these chains play a huge role in now attracting users and to build towards a future where we'll have more inclusivity.
Yeah, I agree with.
Cool. Interesting.
So, my bad, man.
I'm sorry, Goose, you go.
I was just saying, I agree with I agree with everything Eddie and Alex said as well. I mean, obviously they improve user experience. I think lower barrier to entry is pretty much the biggest one. They're definitely cheaper. I mean, I know that any normal person ever that looks at the sheer amount of the final number of how much gas you've used cumulatively at like the end of a year, it would like probably kill them. Like it almost killed me the first time I saw it. So I think that's honestly the biggest part. But I really agree actually with Eddie on like these like DeFi specific kind of like app chains. I'm not sure if they're like completely the future and the solution to all of our problems, but I do think like these things that are optimized for certain use cases, like you said, like a super fast performant L1 for like trading derivatives, or like a gaming chain, all these things that have different what am I trying to say? So like if you're on DeFi, right, like you obviously value security, but maybe you value speed and whatever a little bit less. Obviously traders supremely value speed. Someone on a gaming chain might value the no fee transactions and instant speed, but give up some security for that. So I think that we will actually see a bunch of those proliferate kind of over time, and I don't know if they're gonna kind of start coming together and optimizing. I don't know if some of them are just going to kind of slowly sort of die and peel off or rebrand and do something else, or if there's some super specific use cases we haven't even come up with yet that they can pivot to or whatever. But I actually kind of think that the DeFi specific and mainly these app chains and stuff, I think there's been some first movers and people see the benefit of them, and I do think that in the end there's kind of almost going to be a chain for everyone, right? And there'll always be settlement layers and stuff like that, and who really knows, right? But that's kind of how I see it going.
That's a good point, and that's a very nice segue into the next questions that I want to ask you guys. Very much around the multi-chain world that we live in, and as you guys know, Zeta Chain, one of the things that we do is we connect multiple chains out there with Cosmos and EVM compatible chain, and our idea is to connect all chains, including non-smart contract chains like Bitcoin and beyond. And on that note, I think Bitcoin has definitely been the big talking point in the Web3 industry for the second half of this year, at least probably not just because of the price of Bitcoin outpacing most of the market for like a long part of that period, but also innovation that we've seen, including ordinals, which has been adopted by other chains also with inscriptions. I'm just curious how you guys see Bitcoin smart contracts having the potential to impact the next generation of DeFi services that we see coming through. Alex, do you want to go first with a very Zeta Chain focused answer?
Absolutely. So just going back to start off with the ordinals and such, I think it really is a revolutionary thing that we're seeing right now, being able to inscribe into the unused Satoshis of each Bitcoin block and really presenting a more immutable and presenting a more verifiable way of inscribing things and validating different tokens or representation using the Bitcoin blockchain. And I think there was a lot of innovation happening in Bitcoin right now, and I'm hoping this isn't going to anger some of the maxis here, but I think Bitcoin is really going to evolve to enable a lot of these different functionalities that we've all been promised for so long. The ability to lend and borrow against Bitcoin, I think, is very important, just like how we're able to lend and borrow against cash and gold and other such rare assets. So when it comes to Bitcoin smart contracts, I think it'd be really quite interesting to see how we can enable some of these different NFT marketplaces or even DEXs that are building much better fluid user experiences. For example, if someone were to list an ordinal on Zeta's marketplace and being able to receive their payout in Bitcoin, and the marketplace integrating with an AMM to swap the purchaser's asset for Bitcoin, I think is quite revolutionary. Doing it all from Zeta Chain. I think it opens up a lot of different opportunities that traditional Bitcoin users have been wanting for without having to risk too much of the security aspect of it. I think there's a lot of unused potential here with the native Bitcoin compatibility on Zeta Chain. Also being able to go beyond DEXs and NFT marketplaces, but also being able to finally reduce the dependency on some of these other wrap tokens and being able to create a much more fluid user experience by enabling smart contracts for Bitcoin on top of Zeta Chain really does open up a lot of other possibilities that are not just limited to DEXs and NFT marketplaces, but lending and borrowing. And again, going back to traditional financial pillars, being able to save using your native Bitcoin in a trustless way, I think is quite revolutionary. For a lot of people, the dependency of centralized exchanges, the dependency on bridges does deter a number of people away. So being able to do that in a much more efficient way using our smart contracts while tapping into the native Bitcoin liquidity is going to be quite game changer. And we have Goose here from Sushi Swap as well, who's helping us to enable that. So very exciting times.
Whoop, whoop.
I guess I'll go next. Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly very curious to see how it all goes. I mean, I'm honestly not entirely sure. Obviously, the big change potential impact it could have is like Alex says. I mean, we're tapping into like a ton of liquidity, right? Like Bitcoin is king. Obviously, has the largest portion of the mind share. And yeah, I mean, it's going to allow Bitcoin's liquidity to, flow into DeFi applications. Like you said, I mean, Bitcoin-based lending, borrowing, AMM DEXs, shout out Sushi, GameFi, SocialFi. I mean, really anything that we've seen elsewhere. I mean, it's just another huge pool to kind of tap into and spread it out. And someone correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if this is still the stat, but I think there's like a lot of Bitcoin that's, dormant, whether or not, someone's holding it, they lost it or whatever. So I would imagine that it actually makes, Bitcoin just as an asset itself kind of start moving a lot more as it obviously gets dispersed throughout. But yeah, man, I'm honestly, I'm pretty curious to see how it all goes. I'm fascinated.
Yeah, same. Like for majority of the time, I think Bitcoin holders who just hold Bitcoin on their Bitcoin wallets have been on the sidelines for a lot of DeFi. I think the ability for them to come in and participate into the DeFi ecosystem, not having to rely on wrapped assets or even sort of derivatives to participate, I think that becomes a huge thing. And then with the BRC20 sort of coming and flowing also ordinals, I think it creates a very big canvas of things you can do with cross-chain interoperability between Bitcoin, which again, as Goose said, is the king, right? That's where maximum liquidity is. That's where folks are, and that's been for majority of the part dormant. So having the ability to sort of reactivate them, bringing into the broader ecosystem, I think will make it more robust and sort of bring everyone into like a combined easier way. So I imagine the future to be where you don't have to think a lot about chains, and I'm sure at a point like we'll be able to abstract the whole network concept and make the user experience as simple as possible in terms of, let's say, a user who just come into Web3 can easily navigate and not have to maintain multiple wallets, not have to think about wrapping, would not have to think about gas fees on every chain, and that sort of will culminate into a simple thing. I think I was at one of the events and I heard someone speak, and then I think that is what I could most relate to in terms of a simple analogy. Imagine a world to be, I have a cell phone tower, and then I'm currently in India, And when I fly to the US, I don't have to go out, change everything. My SIM automatically connects to the nearest tower in the US and could be from a different network provider, and I automatically ship there, and everything's like as smooth as possible. And I think with what Zetachain's been trying to do with Bitcoin smart contracts or Omnichain smart contracts in general is having to remove all that complexity and act as this provider that would enable you to shift your cell phone tower to any of the chains that you're near or sort of are using.
Awesome. And we've actually just added another speaker to the panelists, which is great. Tabasco, who is developer relations with Particle Network, one of our partners. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, guys?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good. Is my mic coming through?
Yes. Yes, hear you perfectly. Great. You've missed a few questions, but I know you've been patiently sitting in the audience, listening to the guys talking, some of the questions that I've been asking. Is there anything that you want to add so far? I guess the most recent question was around Bitcoin's potential in the DeFi networks as we know them. Is there anything that you wanted to add beyond what the guys have just talked about on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of listening a little bit so far, on the side here, and super cool conversation thus far. I think like Bitcoin is actually a really interesting topic, especially for us at Particle. I don't know how much I can say, to be honest, but like what I'll give you guys maybe some alpha for the space here, is that over the next well, first of all, like we're very excited about the potential of Bitcoin as an ecosystem. Especially even like things like side chains that like rootstock and stuff like that we think are pretty cool as well. And to kind of go with that, to go with our excitement of Bitcoin as a ecosystem, especially with things like DeFi and whatnot, we're going to be launching a lot of stuff on DeFi over the next 2 or 3 months on Bitcoin DeFi. Kind of a lot of things in relation to wallet connection and whatnot, because in general I think that like at least from my kind of brief experience with Bitcoin as an ecosystem, there's a lot of really cool applications and a lot of cool things being built out at the moment. Although like what we've identified is that the underlying user experience and kind of the degree to which onboarding is accessible for users in Bitcoin isn't quite like adjacent or parallel to the current user experience of EVM. I mean, on EVM, there's so many tools today for better user experience, better onboarding, and of course, thus more DeFi users. And for us, we're hoping to kind of bring some of that to Bitcoin over the next few months. I don't know if I can say much more than that, but we have a lot of cool stuff planned for there. I think overall, the Bitcoin ecosystem is growing quite quickly, and we're pretty bullish on what's going to be happening. And we're investing a lot of resources in making sure that we can kind of support that, and of course, hopefully make the DeFi ecosystem on Bitcoin a little bit more accessible and kind of bring it to general consumers potentially.
Very cool. Thanks so much for that. Interesting stuff. We'll have to look forward to what you guys have coming up. Just a bit of housekeeping. There's a few folks who've asked who want to speak. We're just going through some questions that we have with the panelists first. We've got another couple of questions that I'm going to be asking. So if you guys can hold on until we're done, then we will take some questions from the audience. So I've not forgotten that people are asking, but we're just going to go through the panelists first, and then at the end we will take requests. Okay, so just following on, we talked about multi-chains and Bitcoin smart contracts. I guess kind of we might have some overlap with this question, but I'm really curious to understand the vision for how you guys see the DeFi landscape would look in a multi-chain world. So with even more chains coming online, both multi-purpose chains and also very DeFi focused chains. How's that going to look like for both the devs that are building product and the users that are out there using staking and lending? Who wants to go first? Open to all of the panelists.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first. I think from a developer standpoint, what DeFi looks like in a multi-chain world, I'll address some of the concerns first and what the current experience is like and what I hope is the collective vision of where we can all end up. So, with current developers that are currently building out different DeFi apps right now, I think previously we've all gotten very accustomed to integrating different chains and attracting the users from those different chains to interact with the DeFi app. Um, another another issue that arises from that is sourcing liquidity for those different chains. So, albeit you can be connected to so many different chains, but sourcing the liquidity for each of those chains is another journey in itself, right? For developers and being able to ensure that none of your smart contracts are going to get exploited and making sure that you're not adding in additional user experience for some of those users to interact with your DApp, I think is going to be something to keep in the back of your head when it comes to a multi-chain DeFi world. For users, I think this all goes back to user experience and what this multi-chain world does look like. Right now, there's a lot of different assets that you can stake, borrow, that you can earn against, and they're quite fragmented across all these different chains, right? You have your native gas assets for these different chains, and you have these other tokens that have far superior liquidity on one chain versus the other. So being able to unify that liquidity is going to be very important when it comes to a multi-chain future that provides users seamless experience across these different chains, being able to make sure that these users are able to have exposure to some of these assets on different chains that they may not be able to get otherwise, and also ensuring at the back of the user's mind that their funds are insured by deep liquidity. So again, this all goes back to the user experience. And just for another example as well, there's currently a lot of different lending markets out there, which I think for myself personally is quite an important pillar when it comes to DeFi. With Zetachain, we can make capital more efficiently by being able to transport assets from one ecosystem to another as the demand shifts based on if we did have omni-chain money markets and being able to connect them in different ways that were not even possible before. Um, touching base on that right now, if demand to borrow USDC on one chain rises, there's really no way for users to access that hypothetical hundreds of millions of USDC on that source chain deployment. So right now, this is a significant cross-chain inefficiency that an omni-chain design can address. So I really think the future is really going to be omni-chain smart contracts, being able to create omni-chain money markets, and being able to unify this liquidity together.
Yeah, I agree with Alex as well. I mean, I think oh man, a multi-chain world. I think it starts kind of how it feels now for everyone, dev or not. Fragmented, hard to kind of stay on top of. Like Alex said, there's all these different native gas tokens to worry about, and just all these. There's like forks and protocols on literally every chain. But I do think as the ecosystem, kind of continues to flesh out and organically, just builds out, teams continue to build and integrate, like I touched on a bit earlier, all this interoperability. I do believe eventually it will be at least a relatively smoother experience that's definitely way more capital efficient and cheaper, because like I said, I do kind of see there being like these specific use case chains where like if you're going to do one thing, you'll do it there and it'll be the cheapest possible for you. I think for developers, you'll probably see a couple things. I think we'll probably see net more devs coming into the space. There's more opportunities everywhere, and seemingly endless fire hose of projects daily coming out. Tons of jobs around, and I think the tooling obviously continues to get better. We touched on that a bit earlier as well, but it's already gotten way better just in the last 2 years. So I can only imagine it'll get better.
Probably indexing all the data on all those will be a pain, but hopefully, someone gets something built for all of that soon. And I do overall just think there's going to be more developer talent that's kind of brought over from traditional, Web 2. More things to do, more interoperability. I do think at some point it'll optimize a bit, and for all of these chains and networks we see now, I think some of them might, like I said, start kind of coming together and consolidating a bit. But overall, it's definitely steps in the right direction in my opinion, and I think a net positive for everybody at the end of the day.
Yeah, maybe I can kind of add a little bit here as well from also kind of the UX perspective. I think that, and to be honest, I think that like Zetachain is playing a huge role in solving what right now is a pretty like nightmarish user experience flow for people that aren't already familiar with Web3. I mean, you can imagine like the example I tend to give is, try to get your neighbor to onboard to Web3 and start using DeFi products, especially across multiple chains. And the learning curve is so significant that, we just don't see that happen very often. And a big part of that learning curve is the fact that we have this intense fragmentation between ecosystems. Different ecosystems work differently. Different applications exist across different ecosystems. And of course, DeFi itself is not unified at the moment, which means that for new users, it's very confusing and there's a lot to learn. So how do we solve this? I mean, I think Zetachain is offering a really solid solution to a lot of these problems, unifying a lot of this. And of course, I think that like most likely in the future, I really just don't see, and like at Particle, we kind of take the stance that probably in the future, this current multi-chain landscape probably won't be the norm for new users. There will be kind of omni-chain accessibility of applications and of verticals that abstracts away a significant part of the multi-chain experience, which I think is absolutely necessary. Like on our side, we're thinking a lot about like how things like intent-centric design can potentially bring us closer to that future where there is like actually on the interaction level for users, there is less of a thought of the specific chain that you're on, right? Having ways to kind of remove that from the user experience and instead handle that for the user. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to create applications that people want to use and people don't feel overwhelmed with. And I think a big part of why as an ecosystem we've somewhat failed to deliver on that is probably because of fragmentation across ecosystems. And I think that honestly, we probably aren't too far away from like solving this issue and ultimately like multi-chain user experience being kind of a thing of the past. And I think Zetachain, as well as of course technologies like Intents, are doing a lot to progress us towards that future where things are unified. And of course, a core user experience feels natural, feels very Web2 adjacent, I think is a big part of the goal.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, it's not just like liquidity fragmentation, but also isolation in terms of all the ecosystems that exist out there today. There's a huge barrier in terms of handling gas, in terms of handling movement of liquidity. With a multi-chain future, with it being built, and I think Zetachain being one of the lead contributors towards it, I think that culminates into a single experience that does not look like 5 different broken experiences, but all comes in a single bucket. From a developer standpoint, I'll just try and add. So, as we're developing dApps and sort of deploying them on multiple chains, it's very hard for us to code it in a way that's very robust. So, for example, if we are deploying contracts on 6 different chains, it becomes very hard for us to upgrade, maintain a lot of things. With I think one of the powers is omni-chain smart contracts that you can do it at one place and sort of make. As a developer, it makes our lives way easy. So, not just from a user lens where people are trying to go omni-chain and trying to abstract away the difficulties in the user experience. I think with what Zetachain is now doing, they're abstracting a lot of difficulties that we face in terms of deployment on of our dApp on multiple chains, and that's become, I think, crucially also important because if you're enabling developers to develop more omni-chain dApps, that is also a key catalyst to building towards an omni-chain future where the whole concept of networks, whole concept of different gas and different things, fragmentation, isolation of chain sort of becomes less and less relevant as we move ahead in time.
Cool, some really great insight. And actually, adding to that, and the last question that I'm going to ask you guys today is just how challenging do you think it is today to launch new services in a DeFi space? Or perhaps actually the answer is how much easier is it? Because I think some of the questions, some of the points that you guys have made have kind of explained that there's many more tools and there's many more chains out there that can help you to do more. So I guess maybe the comparison is how different is it launching a DeFi product today versus previously?
So I think right now the user experience of a developer deploying or creating a DeFi project is quite easy. I think if you're able to assess the demands and you're able to point out the inefficiencies that are currently happening in the DeFi ecosystem, and you're able to create a concrete solution that doesn't add any extra user experience, I think is quite something. I think right now the biggest problem is going to be liquidity. Um, all of these projects have really great ideas. Every single project is doing quite something revolutionary. I think the biggest concern is liquidity. If we do enter this upcoming bull run, this major catalyst where retailers and even traditional finance institutions are going to be using Web3 in some way, form, or another into their daily services, it is important that we're able to source the liquidity and keep up with the demand for the users that we're going to onboard into Web3. So with that in mind, I think one of the issues are going to be liquidity.
Yeah, I mean, I personally do not have a ton of experience with launching a new DeFi service, but it's probably a better question for one of these founders up here. But I would think, yeah, and to go along hand in hand with the liquidity issue, which I agree with. I think it's probably pretty tough just trying to jam your signal through all of the noise. I mean, like I spoke on, it's like a seemingly endless fire hose. I feel like of new projects every day, and they're obviously not all made equal, and all that good stuff. But the point still stands that there's just a ton. And I mean, every day like something new comes out, and I don't know if it's more ideal to kind of be the first mover on a network. Or obviously if you have a 0 to 1 innovation, that's huge. I think people will flock to you no matter what. But I think just trying to somehow get your signal to just cut through all that noise and just get some mind share, get some eyes on you, and somehow try and delineate yourself from the rest of the pack, even if it's a small thing. People like to see teams working and stuff too. So I think if you have a hardworking team that's constantly shipping, that I think people respond to that. But I would say probably just making your project be heard would be what I would think is the biggest issue, along with trying to get liquidity.
Yeah, I think that like
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'll go. So basically, one of the things that's really become easier over time is to sort of build and deploy DeFi apps, not in terms of just like sort of how before you had to. I'll just take the Zeta chain example, right? How before you had to deploy it on multiple chains, look after multiple contracts. When you're trying to move between chains, a lot of traditional solutions would either include wrapping, which became quite unsafe. Then even if you want to, let's say, move native assets or do some complex message passing, the cost would be exponentially high, and then you would have to maintain multiple contracts on multiple chains, and that creates like a web of attack vectors that anyone could exploit. So as developers, I think security becomes a key issue, but with Zeta chain now that's sort of become easy, right? We do not have to maintain 10 different contracts on multiple chains, whereas just we can do that, minimizing the dev effort and also the complexities or the attack vectors that are present today. So one, it helped, the innovation in the space made us sort of for us easier to deploy multi-chain apps. second, I think, would be in terms of user experience and in terms of data availability layers. I think there's a lot of things that have been built. For example, like what Particle is trying to do with user experience. So you can now easily integrate a lot of, let's say, social logins, make the user experience easy. And a couple of years back, that was very hard because you had to build everything from scratch. You had to deploy a lot of safety layers from scratch. Now with tools like these, with chains like Zetachain, what has become in the space has become easier for anyone to come in and not worry a lot about security. Obviously, that stems from a lot of things have become automated or have sort of solidified its space as we have progressed in time. So I think from developer point of view, it has now been one of the times where it's relatively easier to deploy apps. But yes, I agree with what Alex and sort of Goose talked about, the issue with liquidity, with being sort of spotted and positioning yourself right is always tough. And then how you're driving innovation uh, still is as it was, and then trying to build better and newer use cases.
I think like everything that's been said so far are really good points. And like to be honest, uh, I think that of course, the name of this space is remembering DeFi summer. I would say that at least in my opinion, from everything that I've seen, especially things like solving multi-chain friction, um, sort of like unifying all this and solving core user experience issues with enabling things like DeFi automations, and I mean the list goes on of like new cool things that have been coming out in the DeFi space just over the past 6 months, really. That will absolutely revolutionize the space. I think we probably aren't too far away from a pretty significant evolution or resurgence in kind of like what we call DeFi and the applications that are possible. So I think that like developers have a really big opportunity right now with all of these cool technologies coming out. Really over the next 6 months have been kind of released and started, being built over the past 6 months. I think that we're pretty close to most of these cool things being released, just across the ecosystem, which is really exciting, especially things like intents. I think that we are probably like globally within Web3. I think 2024 is going to probably be the year where DeFi and similar use cases become much more powerful than they are today. Because I think we're going to be unlocking a lot of use cases that just weren't possible with previous infrastructure. And of course, on top of this, it's easier than ever to build in Web3. The number of resources, the amount of like really great SDKs and libraries, things you can use to build applications like pretty easily are insane compared to what it was just a few years ago. So I think that we're at a point today where like we're on the cusp of what is a really exciting opportunity for developers across the board in terms of what's possible, and kind of how they can create a unique DeFi product that hopefully can stand out, because there is a lot of noise. But I think that with what will be possible soon, I think the types of applications that can be built will be unique enough to hopefully cut through most of that.
Awesome. Okay. Is there anything else that you guys want to add? We're going to open the floor up to questions from the audience. So if you have a question that you want to ask around DeFi summer, future DeFi products, any of the topics that we've talked about, now's your chance to indicate that you would like to speak. I'll also give the guys a chance, the panelists a chance, if there's any sort of closing comments that you want to give. But I think honestly, like that last question and the answers that you guys gave was pretty comprehensive, and I think wrapped up a lot of the topics that we've got. But is there anything else that you guys feel like you'd like to add? Okay, I'm taking the silence as meaning that we've covered this topic so thoroughly that there's nothing else that you guys want to add. So in that case, let's go to the questions. Okay, so I'm going to start to let folks on to ask questions. Okay, Logan, you're connecting. You'll be the first person to ask a question when you've connected. <clears throat> . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . Hey, Logan,
Yo,
hear us?
GM, what do you?
Hi there. Is there a question that you wanted to ask
Yeah,
to the panelists?
I just want to know, my question goes to Goose. So I just want to know, like, what are some of the biggest challenges you've actually encountered so far during the development of your projects, and how are they really overcome?
Was that for me?
I think so, yeah. It's a pretty broad question. So
Yeah,
everything Supershop
Yeah,
has
I've got
built, I guess.
something.
I'm not sure if there's any.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on it. I'm sure if we brought, one of our lead engineers on here, they would have a lot more things to talk about in that regard. But I do know that one of the main issues, I mean, one of the main challenges that we have that's like kind of unique to Sushi Swap at the moment, at least, is that, we're deployed across 30 plus networks right now. And the same way we've been talking about why, it's so important to have kind of the right infrastructure together to like handle all of these different token standards and really different infrastructures. I mean, these people do all things differently or whatever. So everything from, I guess, Zeta Chain is actually not a great example because we didn't have to upgrade any of our contracts or change anything for you guys. But there's certain things, like, for example, like I was talking earlier about how it's kind of a pain to index all the data on all these chains. Like, we have to basically, we have a solution, that works, that we can use for most EVM chains. But for example, we just launched on Aptos, our first non-EVM chain. And, I mean, it requires not a whole new stack, but I mean, it's a pretty reasonable engineering lift to, get in there and collate all this data together and then, be able to put it on our UI for everybody. But it's just like, it's stuff like that, I would say. We had all these liquidity pools up with people on all different kinds of chains. And, I mean, it's really just like the sheer number of projects and, kind of irons in the fire that we had going. I mean, we're all pretty good at it now. We're all very used to it. I mean, it's been a long time since we were really, like, not on very many chains, right? Like, we've been kind of expanding pretty aggressively for a while now, so we're all pretty used to it. But I would say, from my standpoint, that the hardest thing has probably been just trying to keep the user experience seamless for everybody while also servicing all these relatively unique ecosystems. That's what I would say. Does that answer your question? I hope it does.
Yep. Okay, cool. Let's add the next person. Okay. Okay, just connecting. Hello, Nerd.eth. Your question. Please ask the panelists.
Hello guys, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you so much for giving me opportunity. So there are too many DeFi security incidents since the market starts to be prosperous, and the security of DeFi is a big concern for users. So what measure does your project take to safeguard the user assets?
I couldn't quite catch. Could you repeat the question again? Sorry, I think there's some
Yeah,
background
sure.
sounds where you are.
Yeah, sure. So my question is, there are too many DeFi security incidents since the market starts to be prosperous, and the security of DeFi is a big concern for users. So what measure does your project take to safeguard the user assets? Are
So you're asking about security. So what do the projects do to stop security issues and hacks, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Who wants to go first? I'm sure everyone's got good answers for this.
I mean, I'll go first. So one is, I think, in cross chain, the biggest sort of point of failure, and that we've seen in 2022, for example, 2.7 billion sort of loss between bridges. So what we trying to ensure that we are able to protect user funds is number one, not deal with a lot of wrapped assets, because as soon as you have uh, lock and burn mechanisms, or sort of you keep assets on chain A and then mint a synthetic asset on chain B, try and sort of communicate with it. There is a lot of complexity and attack vector sort of web that creates, and becomes really hard for anyone to make sure that with constant evolution to keep track of that. So we do away with that. We just try and deal with native assets, which brings the security standard a little higher. Second thing is, what we do is we go through regular audits. We've in fact been in touch with a few auditors and make sure our code is robust and do not have any leaks. And majorly with making sure that we're using Zetachain so that the message passing is not quite complex, or is not a lot of centralization in that. So we try and make sure that at every front we're covered, working with the best folks and sort of getting the best audits.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question, because otherwise we're going to be here for a long, long time if everybody answers. So 1 second. Okay, connecting the next guest to ask a question. Hi there, Skywalker. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have a question for any particular panelist? And if so, what's your question?
I have a question for Sushi Swap. Anyways, I just wanted to know what incentives do I get being a liquidity provider on Sushi Swap, and two, how has actually supporting Zeta been for you?
Hey, I caught that second part. What was the first part of your question? I'm so sorry.
What incentives do I get being a liquidity provider on your platform?
What's it take to be a liquidity provider?
Yeah, could I be a liquidity provider on Sushi Swap?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, I was missing the first couple words. Yes, anybody can be a liquidity provider. Literally anybody. Highly encourage you. I'll throw the link in the chat here in a second, but highly encourage you to get in there and check it out. And we have all different kinds of vehicles to provide liquidity to. Spoke on it right when I was doing the intro, but we have smart pools that kind of have they're automated with by Steer protocol, and they have kind of like leave it and park your money and leave it strategies, low risk stuff that kind of does different things. There's elastic expansion and butterfly stuff and things like that. But yes, I highly recommend you hop in and check it out. If you actually have your own project, if you go in our Discord, we have an entire group of channels that are dedicated to integrations and people asking about that. And if they wanted to seed their liquidity and have some questions, just kind of before they cheat all their money into it, like, always happy to help there. I'm actually one of the main people that sit in the Discord and answer those questions, so feel free to hit me up at any time. And what was the second part of your question?
It was a great question. How are you working with Zetachain?
Oh yeah, how are we working with Zetachain? Well, the big thing that Zeta is bringing to us that we touched on a little bit before is that we're doing native Bitcoin swaps. We get to tap into that massive pool of native Bitcoin liquidity and push it around. It's just a whole new sandbox of fun to play with. And yeah, I mean, if anything, I mean, it's just adding more function. The high level answer is it's obviously adding more functionality to us. The more lower level answer is, yeah, we get to push all this Bitcoin liquidity through the system, bring native Bitcoin swaps. Bitcoin is king. I said it before, Bitcoin's got all the mind share. It's all anybody ever talks about. And yeah, I mean, that's the big thing for us. And obviously there's certain convenience things too. Like I said, I mean, like, integrating Zetachain, we didn't have to change any of our contracts. It was all very easy. It's pretty much like just launching on any other EVM compatible chain. But definitely ease of lift on our engineers to bring native Bitcoin swaps to the platform that's it, my man. That is the answer to your question. That's it.
That's great. That's the great show, and it didn't come from me or anybody else working for us, which is awesome. So great to hear that. Okay, we're going at 1.5 hours, so we're gonna have a couple more questions because I know some folks have been asking for some time. Then we're gonna let everyone go. So I'll add the next guest to ask a question. So thanks everyone for being very, very patient. I know this has run on for quite some time, but I think it's been some great conversations, some great content. Okay. Victor, I think you're on. Can you hear us? What's the question that you have for the
Hello,
panelists
sir.
here?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, my question is, what is the utility of your token in your ecosystem? Why should I buy and hold long term?
Okay. You might have to be more. Who are you asking that question to?
ED.
Okay.
Sorry, can you come again? I lost you there for a while.
Yeah. What is the utility of your token in your ecosystem? Why should I buy and hold long term?
Okay, like first of all, I don't think we have a token. So if you're looking at any of the tokens, that isn't ours. And yeah, we'll be launching like a roadmap end of this week that talks about what we're trying to do with the ecosystem. But currently, we do not have any token.
Okay. Cool. Next question is coming in shortly. Okay. Alex, you have a question for the panelists or a particular panelist? What's your question? Hey, Alex, can you hear me? I think you're on mute still.
Hello.
Hi there. Yeah. What's the question that you have?
Okay. So my question is, what's your main focus right now? Are you focused on the community or market? Exchange the products? This is my question.
Okay, this is quite a general question. Is there anyone you're going to ask that to, or okay, I think that's a bit too general for us to answer. So sorry, Alex, we're gonna skip that one. Unless anybody has any burning desire to answer, I think it's quite broad. Feel free to say if you do.
Skip.
Okay. And next speaker's loading. Next guest to ask a question is going to be Lex. Can you hear me? Can you come off mute? What's the question that you want to ask our panel?
Hello guys, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, yes. Hello. What's your question? Oh, Alex. Sorry, I didn't see the A in
My
front of
question
the
is,
Lex.
can you
Alex,
please?
yes.
Hello guys, can you hear me?
Yes, go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you so much for giving me opportunity. So my question is, can you please tell us some of the potential use cases for interoperability and layer to bridge technology? How secure the bridge because people tend to lose their assets during bridging?
Okay, I think there's a lot of background noise where you are. You might need to ask that question again because I didn't quite catch it fully.
Hello, are you guys understood my question?
It wasn't, your audio line's not so clear. Can you repeat again?
Okay, repeat my question.
Yes, please. Yeah. Can you repeat the
Hello,
question?
can you hear me? Hello, can you?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. So my
Okay, I think we're having some. Yes. What's your question?
hello guys, can you hear me? Hello.
Okay, I'm sorry, Alex. Not a great connection there, so we'll move on to the next one. Okay, and it's another Alex. Alex, can you come off mute? What's the question that you have?
Hello,
Hello.
can I ask my question?
What's your question?
Okay,
Yes, please do.
okay. My simple question is, what's your mission and vision? This is my question.
Okay, you asking that to me or any particular panelist? Okay, these are quite vague. I'm sorry, we're gonna have to skip that question. So, asking somebody what their vision is, and they've been talking about DeFi for 1.5 hours, is probably not a question that we need to spend time on. Sorry. And one more. I think we have one. Mr. Nobody. A great name to end our Q&A on once he's connected.
All right. I have a question for Zeta
Hello.
Chain. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep, yep.
All right.
Very loud, very clear. Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question to Eddie Finance and then to Zeta Chain. So for Eddie Finance, the cross-chain transfer currently supports the major DeFi chain. So I'm thinking we are seeing a kind of surge in the Solana ecosystem. Are we going to have support for Solana and some of the other non-EVM chains in the future? And then for Zeta chain, I have two questions. I've been part of the community for a long while, although I admit I have a little bit of challenges. But the validation of Zeta chain, when I go through it, is controlled by a lot of enterprise organizations. DeFi for me would be much better if individuals have access to core operations such as validation. So is Zeta Chain going to make it possible for individuals to also join the validation program in the future? And then the last question, still for Zeta Chain, is it possible that in the future we will have a DeFi wallet that is created specifically for omni-chain transaction? Currently, we have a whole lot of wallets, MetaMask, Trust Wallet, and everyone, but all of them they were developed with their own ideas. But Zeta Chain, for me, is building something very peculiar. So it would be easier if we have a default wallet created by Zeta Chain itself to carry on the omni-chain transaction. Those are my questions. Thank you very much. And I'm very excited to be part of the show today.
Okay.
Okay,
Are we good?
I think I can answer those first two questions. Yeah, so definitely for the validators, we do have plans for liquid staking. So that's definitely in the roadmap. Regarding your quote unquote centralization, I don't think that's the case. For Zetachain, we are completely decentralized and we are a public blockchain since we're built on Cosmos SDK, Tendermint consensus, and Zetachain nodes monitor the transactions on every single one of our connected chains. And our TSS accounts and the TSS architecture is able to sign and verify transactions on all these different connected chains. And the keys for these TSS accounts are actually quite fragmented. On the second side, regarding your wallet question, I think it's very important to bring in all these different wallet providers to Zetachain. and bringing them into the omni-chain world?
Yeah, I'll take the second part of the question, which is more around the interoperability experience that we're building. So currently, we're mainly focused on the top 5 chains, which also Citizen support. So our core focus is mainly Bitcoin to Ethereum and Matic and BNB. That's our core focus for next quarter. And after that, we are also exploring to devise on like what chains to move on to. But currently, with the next quarter, our core focus is to stabilize and bring in higher liquidity and support these with the algorithms that sort of make sure that we find the most optimal route and just deal with native assets. So currently, the next quarter is just focusing on building that user experience and providing that quite well.
Awesome. And I think after more than 1.5 hours, I think we're going to call this Twitter Spaces. We're going to call time on this Twitter Spaces session. It's been very insightful. It's been had some great conversations about how DeFi began in DeFi summer, how these projects have been building, and the plans that they have going forward with Omni-chain and a lot more. So thank you guys so much for your time. It was much appreciated. If you're one of the audience and you want to review the space, you can check the tweet that we sent out previously, which has details on how you can review the space, and you stand a chance to earn some prize money if you do so too. So do check out the previous tweets that we shared. And thanks again to our excellent panelists. Lovely to have you, and we'll see you soon on the next session that we have, which will be coming up in January. So very, very soon. Thank you so much for your time. Take care and see you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.